Hello, everybody. Today we are going to talk about Awesome PrivEsc escalation. I'm going to present you the P suite if you don't already know it. My name is Carlos Polo Martin. I'm currently pentester senior at c0c0n, a client company here in the UK. You can contact me, you can reach me in Telegram, in Twitter, or via email if you are more traditional. I will try to remind this at the end of the conference, but if at some point in the following weeks or whenever you want to suggest me any addition to the suite I'm going to present you or to the book I'm going to show you, please feel free just to contact me in any of those details, and I will try to add wherever you are recommending me, or if you have any question, you can just ask me in there and I will try to help you. So now we are going to start with the presentation. First of all, let's see what I'm going to talk about today. We are going to talk a little bit about what is PrivEsc escalation, what do we need PrivEsc escalation, what is it useful for. Then I'm going to present the P suite, which is a compilation of tools that may help you trying to escalate PrivEsc locally in Windows and Linux. Then I'm going to do some demos of the Linux version and two demos of the Windows version, because there are two different scripts for Windows. We will talk about that later. So let's get started. What is PrivEsc escalation? What is this useful for? So I'm sure you have been in the situation, or you may be in the future in the situation, where you're making some red teaming, you're making some pen testing, and you manage to compromise a box, and you end up like a regular non-privileged user. So you are very limited in the things you can read from the system. You are limited in your actions inside the system. You cannot do much. So you decide that it would be nice if you could escalate privilege. Because when you are root, when you are administrator in a Windows machine, when you have this more high privilege, you will be able to perform more actions. For example, you will be able to access better persistence techniques, more stealthy ones, more complex one that is more difficult to detect you. So you will probably want to escalate privilege for this subject. Also, being an administrator, being a privileged user, you will be able to read all the files in other user folders, which is really amazing in some real life situations, because a lot of users will have a lot of sensitive data in their folder. So that's another reason. Also, I think all of us know about Mimikatz, which is a Windows tool that can be very, very useful to extract credentials from memory. And in order to execute this tool, you need to run under a high privilege account. So, for this and another motives, like lateral movement or any other reason, you could really be interested in escalate privilege. So that's why I have created these tools that is called P suite. This is a compilation of tools. There are two for Windows, there is one for Linux, and coming soon there is one for MacOS, which aims to help you in this matter of escalating privilege. So the goal of this tool is to try to enumerate the system, try to present you with a lot of useful information that you can use to escalate privilege, and present you in a real way that is very, very useful for the pentester. Because, before I created these tools, there were already other tools that aims to do the same as these ones, but I think they weren't enough, because most of them didn't have all the enumeration things that this suite have. Also, you can imagine that there were some tools that present you an endless list of data that was really, really boring to read. You had like thousands of lines, or mostly useless data that you don't want to read. It even discourages you of trying to escalate privilege. I mean, you were presented with this data, you just wanted to stop doing this because, you didn't want to read that. Also, I like to create this tool because I really like the privilege escalation subject, and I found that there were a lot of paths, a lot of techniques that wasn't taken by these other tools. So I decided to create this suite. Also, I think I can say that P suite has more checks than any other tool out there, because I often read the source code of other tools that I'm doing the same, and if they have had any other method, any other tech that I don't have in my suite, I will add it. So I think you will find here more text than in any other tool. Obviously, this doesn't mean that my tool is perfect. I think there is in the wild a lot of text still to find, but well, it is growing day by day. And also, and this is the feature that I think people like the most, is that the output you are going to find from the P suite is colored. This doesn't mean that the titles of each chunk of data is colored. This means that like the raw data, the things that you are interested in is going to be colored in some colors that is going to really help you to visualize what you can abuse, what you cannot abuse, what is vulnerable, what is not vulnerable. And this really helps because when you are presented with all this data, you are going to be able to very, very fast focus on what is important. And you won't need to just go around reading a lot of useless data. You will just know where you can, what you can abuse to escalate this privilege. And as I have already said, there is one tool for Linux and two for Windows. The MacOS is coming soon. I'm probably releasing the MacOS version this September, this month. The MacOS version is not going to be a different script. What I'm just doing is I'm just getting WinPiece, the Linux version, and making it compatible with MacOS, which is kind of well, difficult because MacOS use different binaries and everything. So it is taking me more time than expected, but you can expect a release of the MacOS version this September. So let's start with some nice demo. But before that, I want to present you the hack tricks book, because during the demos, you are going to see, well, here is the hack tricks book. You can find it in this URL. You can find, I think, very interesting, a checklist with Linux privilege escalation techniques. I think here you can find all the things that I think you need to check when you try to escalate privilege locally in Linux. It will try to guide you a little bit about what are you looking for. But if at some point you don't understand, for example, how can you abuse some sudo or suid commands, or what are capabilities, you just can click on the link and you will be redirected to a more complex part of the book where everything is more explained. So you can really, in this book, you can really learn and understand what you need to look for when you try to escalate privilege in this part of in Linux, because at the moment we are talking Linux. So here you have all the theory you need to understand in order to escalate privilege, in order to abuse vulnerabilities that WinPiece is going to find for you. So be sure that you understand the checklist. Be sure that you understand everything you're looking for, because when we are going to now to see that, but when you see a lot of colors in WinPiece, for example, it's going to be very nice. It's going to let you focus on the important part. But if you don't know why, what is the reason why the colors are there, you are not going to know how to exploit the vulnerability. So it's really important that first of all you understand what you are looking for, and then you start using the tools. So that's enough. I really want to do some demo because I think it's the most funny part of the talk. So I have here some virtual machines. This is a really vulnerable Ubuntu virtual machine that I have prepared myself with a lot of vulnerabilities that are going to be discovered by WinPiece. I have already run WinPiece because it can take some minutes, and I don't want to make you wait for that. So at the moment, I just run WinPiece, and I gave the password of the current user, just because if you know the password of the current user, WinPiece can use it to perform more checks. So I gave it to him, and I just run it. So first of all, you can see here that this is WinPiece. It was really tough to create this pip, so I really like looking at it because it reminded me that it wasn't easy to create this figure. So we can see that I am running the last version available. Always that you're going to use this script, check if you are using the last version, because I updated this like every week or even every day. So check that you're running the last version. So let's take a look to the output. Here we can see that it starts with some basic information about the system. We can see here that WinPiece is telling us that it can be used to discover network assets. We will see later how can we do this with this script. And the first thing that we are going to read here is system information. So you can actually see what I have already told you. The colors are very important in this script because here we can see that WinPiece has found that this pseudo version is a little bit outdated and maybe we can explore it. But not only this, but it has found that we have write privilege over some paths inside the folder. And this color, this red color with yellow background, represents that we probably, highly probably, we can abuse this to escalate privilege. So why is that the colors are so important? Here presented more system information, some environment information. We can see something in red. This means that they may be interesting. And in our case, we are seeing an APK, some password. And the last part of this section is just try to enumerate some possible defense software installed in the machine that may be useful for you to know if this is working or not, because depending on this, you may be able to exploit some vulnerabilities or you may not be able to. So then we are presented with some device information, some available software. It's always interesting to know if you have any compiler installed, because if you want to abuse some kernel exploit, it's always better to compile it inside the vulnerable machine than in your own. Then we are presented with some more information, some process information, or we take a look at what is running at root, because you may be able to abuse the process and escalate privilege. Some binary process permissions. In this case, all the binaries that are being run are owned by root, so we cannot exploit anything. Processes with credentials in memory. This is kind of interesting, but you need root to extract credentials from here. So at the moment, it's not important for us, but always keep this in mind. Cron jobs. Here you can see that WinPiece found another way to escalate privilege abusing cron jobs. So that's why the colors are so important. Here we are listing some services, some system Depath. We found that we have write privilege on the system Depath. It means that we could be able to adjust some services running, and we have even write privilege over a service file. So this means that we can escalate privilege in this machine. Also some system timers. If you don't know what are timers, you can take a look here. I didn't talk about this, but I try to explain what I'm looking in each check inside WinPiece. And in order to do so, I just put a URL to the book we saw before. Just so if you don't understand, for example, what are sockets and how can you abuse a socket file, you can just reach this page and you can learn how to, for example, abuse this vulnerability, because we have write privilege over a socket file and probably we can abuse this to escalate privilege. So if you don't know what is the bus, you can take a look here. In this case, we can see that we have some kind of privilege over the bus configuration file. So we definitely should take a look at that, because maybe we can escalate privilege. Just more the bus. Network information. We have a lot of information here about the network. Probably the most important part is to take a look to which services are running on localhost, because if you just compromise this machine, these are services that you probably couldn't be able to access before. So always take a look at this. This is why this is on red. Can we sniff with TCP down? This is really interesting. If you can sniff with TCP down, you may be able to gather some credentials for the network. So always keep a look at this. Then users information. Here we can see that we are part of this group. We are part of the sudo group, and this color is telling us that, hey, you can abuse these groups to escalate privilege. Well, sudo.cell shows us that we are in the sudo group, that we can use sudo to execute anything as root. So obviously we can escalate privilege with this. Sudo tokens. This is really interesting. If you don't know about it, you should totally investigate about this, because sudo token can be abused to escalate privilege. pkexec, we are in the group, so yeah, we can escalate here. We have also present a lot of information about other users, because it could be interesting to know which other users can do and cannot do. Yes, login policy, password policy, okay. Software information. This is really, really interesting, because WinPiece does not take a look to system and user configuration, but it will also try to look for a lot of specific software files that, if they are present, they may contain password or hashes on interesting information for privilege escalation matter. For example, we can see here that we were able to read the MySQL file and extract the root hash and the Debian sys main hash. It means that we could be able to crack those and access the database root and, well, maybe escalate privilege from there. Also, it will try to search for files of a lot of different files and a lot of different software. So always keep an eye in here, because if it finds something, probably something interesting, you will also keep an eye in SSL and SSH files. For example, here we can see that we found that root can log in. Here we can see that WinPiece also found some SSH private keys. So it's so interesting. It found that we can exploit the typical and all no root squash NFS vulnerability. If you don't know what this is, you have here a link. So yeah, you can see that it will try to find a lot of different possible files with credentials. So always keep an eye on this section. Finally, WinPiece is going to show us some interesting files. It means that for some reason, the files that appear here are interesting. Also, we are using the red and red-yellow color, because here and here we can abuse these files to escalate privilege. Also, you will take a look to ld.so files. These are the libraries that are going to be. These configuration files are configuring the paths where a binary is going to search for libraries. So if we can write in there, we may change these paths and may load arbitrary libraries into arbitrary binaries. So we could abuse that to escalate privilege. Capabilities are really interesting Linux thing. If you don't know about it, you can read it here. Files with ACLs. Most of people don't know that Linux have also ACL. It's just not a Windows thing. So always keep an eye on the files that in Linux that have ACL, because maybe it is interesting. Well, at the end, you can find here a lot of different files, a lot of different paths that may be interesting for one or other reason. You will always find why is it interesting and how can you exploit this in the URL I put here. So, as I told you before, keep an eye on the book, because if you understand what WinPiece is looking for, every time you see some red color, you are perfectly going to know what you are looking for and how can you abuse it, and it's going to make much more easy your way to escalate privilege. Also, WinPiece will try to read every history file and try to search for possible commands with passwords in it. Anyway, it might lose something, so always take manual looks to bash history files or any other file that may contain credentials, because WinPiece is not perfect, obviously, and it might miss something. So these kind of files, take a manual look, because you can find more interesting info inside of it. Finally, we have here some interesting readable files. We can see that, yeah, we can write inside kind of weird files that we shouldn't be able to write. Now we can abuse this to escalate privilege. And well, it will also try to find password inside logs, try to emails. It will also try to find files with the word credential and power on it, because it may be useful. Yeah, so at the end, you can see here that you actually don't have like really big lists of data. This is like the biggest list you can find must be like this one. And this is because this probably have a lot of false positive. So I don't want you to overload with false positive. I will just limit to 70 the number of lines you can see from here, and give you a brief look of what you can find here. Actually, we really found some kind of password in this, but you can see that the rest of this output is false positive, so I just don't want to overload with false positive. So This is WinPiece. This is what you can expect from it. You can expect a lot of colored output, a lot of checks, a lot of help when you try to escalate privilege, but you can also wait more from this tool because it have also network capabilities. This means that if at some point you are playing a CTF, you are performing some pen tests, some red team, whatever, you want to see what is in the network, but for some reason you don't have nmap installed, there is a netcat installed, but you don't want to create any ugly script in order to search for other machines that are running in the network. You can just use WinPiece, and it's really simple. It's going to make your day. It's going to save you a lot of time because you, for example, imagine we end up in this machine. We are running in this network, and you just want to see other machines installed that are running in that network. You can use an ugly one-liner of ping, or you can use WinPiece, indicate the parameter. That's this one, discover host with ping or fping. We're going to put the IP, we're going to put the net mask, and it will just run, and it will find for you other machines. It's as easy as this. So if, for example, we are going to scan my host machine, and I'm going to start the 8080 port listening here. For example, imagine you're here, you are 131, you find this 129. Okay. And you want to say, you find this is kind of weird, you want to scan this machine, so you can just use WinPiece and ask him to perform a port scan. So you can see in this option that you can use WinPiece to scan an IP address using netcat. It will perform our port scan, and by default, it will use top 1000 ports from mnap to scan it. You don't have to do anything. You just indicate the IP address, and it will try to. Okay, we can see here that well, the scan was run. It was kind of fast because it searched for 1000 ports, and it found open this 8080 port that I previously opened here. So you can see that in those cases that you want to read, you want to perform a fast network scan, you can just rely on WinPiece, do it from there, and it will help you. This is a quality of WinPiece that not a lot of people is aware of, so just keep that in mind. So this is WinPiece. We have seen what you can expect from it. We have seen everything about it. So now let's continue with the presentation, because because now we are going to see the capabilities of WinPiece, which is obviously the Windows version of the P Suite. As before, you can see that there is a checklist also. I put here all the things that I think you should take a look when you try to locally escalate privilege on Windows. And I say locally because WinPiece interacts a little bit with the domain controller, if there is any, but it is not focused on escalating privilege via Active Directory. It is more focused on finding local misconfiguration to escalate privilege locally. This is very useful because in a lot of cases, if you escalate privilege locally inside the machine, you are going to be able to escalate privilege inside the domain controller, inside the Active Directory. So I think it's a really good, great tool to run on all your pentest or red team assessment if you can run it and don't get caught. Be careful with that. So here we can see all the things you should take a look to escalate privilege under a Windows machine locally. It's just the same as before. If you click, for example, in the service part, you will be redirected to the service explanation of the book. Here you can see what are you looking for and how can you search for this manually, because maybe in some case you don't want to read WinPiece because it may be creating a lot of noise and you want just to do the same text but manually. You can find them here. Yeah, as I said before, if you find that you know a technique that is not listed in this book, please contact me. Let me know about this technique. I will add here, and you will share your technique with all the community that reads the book. Also, I will thank you, obviously, because this will be your technique, and it will appear here in the book. So just let me know. Let's continue with some demo. This time of WinPiece. So I have already done the scripts. I have already done run both scripts of WinPiece because it could take some minutes, and well, this will be faster to show to you the output. This is also a machine that I have created that is kind of vulnerable. Obviously, in the wild, usually you're not going to find these machines with a lot of vulnerabilities. You will be lucky if you find one or two, but if you find one or two vulnerabilities using these scripts, you will have saved a lot of time, because if not, you will need to manually perform all these tests, and that will be a little bit tedious. So that's what the scripts are used for, just saving you time, giving you a brief view of how can you escalate privilege, and just helping in your daily life as Red Team, Pentester, CTF player probably. So we can see here that we have the legend. It's important to notice that WinPiece don't have this red-yellow color thing to indicate you highly probable escalate privilege paths. And this is because Windows is a little bit more tricky than Linux. So even if you find something is highly a privilege escalation path, maybe it's not. So I haven't put these colors yet, but I maybe do that in the future, just for a few of them. So before we start seeing information about system, here we can see that this is a virtual machine. We are part of that domain. There are some hotfixes. This is interesting. WinPiece has integrated inside of it Watson, so you don't have to run it manually. Anyway, you have to be careful with this kind of scripts that are based on the hotfix applied to determine if the machine is vulnerable to some exploit or not, because a machine may not have the hotfix for a security vulnerability, but it may have a hotfix, a higher hotfix. So probably these higher hotfix have already applied the lower hotfix, and the security patch is applied, but Watson is not going to detect, because it's not going to see that specifically hotfix. So not every time you see that a machine is vulnerable to this kind of vulnerabilities, it is indeed going to be vulnerable. So always keep an eye in the last hotfix, keep an eye on when was it released, and keep an eye on the vulnerability, because if the latest hotfix is from 2020 and we are seeing here a vulnerability from 2019, probably this machine is not vulnerable to this exploit. So keep that in mind. Also, we are presenting with some environmental variables. Here we can see some probable sensitive information like MySQL password in this case. Also, we are presented here with a lot of interesting Windows settings capabilities that may be useful in order to scale privilege, or may protect the machine from some techniques. So if you don't know, for example, what is LAPS, just take a look here. If you don't know what is LSA protection, just take a look in the book. You will find that explained. Also, of course, we have information about UAC status. At some point during the escalation, this can be very, very annoying, or this can be very easy to bypass. So keep a look at that. Also, we find some transcript history files from PowerShell. These files may contain some credentials, so keep a look at them. WSUS or Windows Standard Elevator. Again, if you don't understand what is anything of this, take a look at the book and you will find it explained there. Here we can find now some users information, some token privilege. This could be very useful to escalate privilege. In this case, it is not. In other case, it might make your day. Also, one thing that I really like a lot about WinPiece is that every time there is a path, it will try to check your permissions against this path, because if you have some kind of owner, write, modify permissions over some path, over some folder, over some file, you may be able to escalate privilege just because you have this permission. So this is really cool, because, for example, in this case, we found that we can have some write privilege over some folders, but we will see later, or maybe before, probably later, that just having some write privilege in the path folder, we can escalate privilege with that easy. So yeah, I really like that feature of WinPiece, because it's always very, very useful. So then some process information. Here we can see all the processes that are running, all the binaries that are being run. If the path is in green, that means that you don't have any special permission over this path. But if the path is in red, that means that you have some kind of permission. In this case, we have all access permission. Also, interesting services. Take a look. WinPiece just found that you can modify this service. This highly probably means that you can escalate privilege. It also found that you can modify this over service file, service binary. This means you can abuse this to escalate privilege also. So yeah, we are finding out. And this is what I was talking about before. Checking write permission in path folders. Just because we have write privilege here, we probably can abuse some kind of DLL hijacking of some service, of some binary processes, or some custom process of the client that is trying to load any DLL, any library. So abusing this privilege here, that is just a write privilege, you can escalate your ware to administrator. So that's why I like this feature so much of WinPiece. Also, application information. We are going to see if we have any kind of interesting information on any software install, because in that case, we may be able to abuse it to escalate our privilege. We are also going to take a look to autoruns applications. This is really interesting from WinPiece, because WinPiece is not also going to check common autorun folders or common autorun registry addresses. It's going also to take a look to other maybe DLLs that are run automatically, other binaries that are run automatically. And I coded this based on the autoruns binary of sysinternals. I take a look at what was autoruns from sysinternals looking, and I just export that features to WinPiece. So here we can really see a lot of different things that are being run automatically. And if we have some kind of permission, for example, all access, or for example, write permission, we may be able to escalate privilege. Also, we not only check WinPiece not only check files and registry, it will also check for WMIC, and it will also check for schedule applications that for some reason this didn't work in this machine, but this usually work. So you can find here a lot of if you have some kind of interesting privilege or on some kind of weird auto-run application, well, you can just modify it and escalate privilege. And Windows really is auto-running a lot of things that you are not aware of. So you may be able to escalate privilege abusing something of this information posted here. Then we're taking a look to device drivers, non-Microsoft device drivers. If you have write permission over some device driver, you are going to escalate privilege. Then some network information. Also, again, it's really interesting to take a look to the service running on localhost. Firewall rules. This can be also very useful in order to exfiltrate information or get a reversal in somewhere. Take a look at this. Windows credential. Windows have a lot of ways to save credentials, and here we are trying to enumerate those of them. So here we can see that we are checking Windows Vault, we are checking credential manager, some RDP credential, the PAPI master keys. This is always really interesting. You could find a lot of credentials if you can access the master key and later decrypt the credential file. Well, at the end, WinPiece is looking for a lot of different possibilities binaries of files in Windows that may have credentials. Also, we may be able to abuse this app cmd to gain credentials. You can just take a look here to find out how. Also, this will also check for Firefox DB, Chrome DB, because you may be able to find credentials in there. Also, follow the links to know how could you, for example, extract the cookies or extract Chrome credentials from the Chrome credentials database, which is a file inside the file system. Well, finally, we can find some interesting files on registry, and this is really interesting because, for example, here we can find safe putty proxy password. So, well, we have already found a password. This is always interesting. We have found some cloud credentials. This means that probably we will be able to access some kind of cloud account. And we all know that accounts in the cloud always have interesting information that deserves to be looked at. So here we have some valid credentials. We will also look for unattended files. We will also for McAfee side list. These are some very old tricks to escalate privilege, but it's always good to look for them. And it will take a look to the file system and check if we can find some credentials that may contain credentials. So that's what you can expect from WinPiece. WinPiece is not an exploitation tool, so you can, if WinPiece find or LinPiece find a very sensitive way to escalate privilege, it will let you know that it has found it. It will let you know how you can exploit it with these links to the book, but you cannot use WinPiece to exploit the vulnerability, because that's a different subject. That's not the goal of WinPiece. So maybe this is a difference between this tool and another tool that may be well, in the wild. So keep that in mind. And finally, we are going to proceed with the last part of this presentation, which is the second WinPiece, because the WinPiece that we have already seen have a heavy requirement, which is .NET 4.5 or higher. And this is because, well, you need .NET to execute this WinPiece because it's written in C#. So in the case that you end up in a weird machine that doesn't have .NET at least 4.5 installed, you will be a little bit pissed off because you cannot execute WinPiece with the colors, but at least you have this batch version of WinPiece, which don't have colors. That's a problem, because the output is not going to be as easy as read of the other tools that I have already presented you, but at least you will be able to run this and try to search for interesting information. So here we are going to be present almost the same information that I have already presented in the color version of WinPiece, but I want to show you, because I want to show something that is really different from both WinPiece versions, and is that let me find an example here. WinPiece, the color version of WinPiece, you will find that if you have some kind of permission, privilege over a path, it is going to be printed in red, and your privilege is going to be printed near, or in red also, near the path that you have permissions over. But the batch version of WinPiece is not going to use any color, and is using internal Windows binaries in order to check if you have any privilege or any permission over a file, over a folder. So what you are going to find is this here. So whenever you are reading this output of WinPiece, you are not interested here. You are going to be presented the path you are checking. Here you are going to be presented some random permission that doesn't affect you. But if you can find any other permission under the first one, this will be the one that is affecting you. And in this case, we have full privilege over this binary. We have full privilege over this folder. So this is the main difference between the both scripts, that WinPiece batch version is a little bit more difficult to read, but once you get used to it, it's going to be very, very, very useful in the cases that you cannot run the other version. So just keep in mind that this version also exists for these maybe old machines, weird machines that doesn't have .NET installed. You will be presented the same information we have seen before, so I'm not going to go through it. So this is WinPiece, this is Olympus, this is the piece suite that I have presented to you. I hope you find this suite interesting. I hope it saves you a lot of time. It has saved me a lot of time, so I really hope that is useful for other people also. Now I'm going to be probably in the Discord solving some questions for the conference. Anyway, as I have said you before, if today you don't have any question, but maybe in 1 week or whenever you have some question about WinPiece, some question about hack trees, some suggestion for both of them, please feel completely free to reach me in my Telegram account, in my Twitter account, or whatever. Just ask me your question. I will try to help you. There is also a lot of people that is suggesting me new additions to the book and to the piece suite, and that really makes this book and these tools grow a lot. So yeah, just feel free to contact me, and thank you very much for being listening to me all this time.